Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack compelling topics and really just distill the core ideas for you.
And today we're getting into something pretty universal, something that many people feel even when life looks good on the outside.
Yeah, that kind of quiet yearning for something more, a sense that there's a deeper reality just out of sight. It's almost a subtle discontent.
It absolutely is. And it fuels this ancient quest, this search for what's often called spiritual enlightenment, a state promising, well, ultimate freedom, peace, maybe real understanding.
So our mission today is to give you a shortcut, a good overview of this huge topic. We want to look at what enlightenment really is, how different traditions see it, the paths people take.
The challenges, which are definitely part of it, and even what modern science is starting to uncover about these, transformative states.
Exactly. The goal is to help you get informed without getting lost in, well, endless details. And here's something intriguing right off the bat. Real enlightenment, probably not what most people think.
That's a crucial starting point. It's often quite different from just feeling happy or peaceful.
And, perhaps surprisingly, the mind itself, our usual tool for figuring things out, is often seen as, well, an obstacle on this journey.
Right, which tells you we're not just talking about learning new facts here. Spiritual enlightenment isn't about accumulating information.
It's more of a state, an understanding.
It's described as a profound state of awareness, yes. A direct experiential realization of truth that goes beyond our normal way of seeing things.
So not something you can just intellectually grasp or think your way into?
Precisely. And that's why you find so many sages and texts stressing that it's, well, ineffable, can't really be put into words adequately.
Like the famous line from the Tao Te Ching?
The Tao that can be named is not the real Tao.
Exactly.
It's like trying to explain color to someone born blind. You can talk about it, but the experience itself is different.
It's an experience of being, then, often described as feeling this profound oneness.
Yes, where the usual boundaries we perceive between me and you, us and nature, even us and the divine, they just seem to dissolve.
And in many traditions, this is the ultimate goal, right? Nirvana, moksha, union with God. It's about liberation from that deep existential suffering.
It is. But you raised a good question earlier. How does this differ from just, everyday happiness or feeling peaceful?
Yeah, if enlightenment brings peace, isn't that the same as having a really good, peaceful day?
That's where the distinction is vital. Normal happiness, normal peace, they tend to be temporary. They depend on conditions, right? Things going our way, no major conflicts.
They come and go, like moods.
Exactly. But enlightenment, as described in these sources, isn't a mood. It's presented as eternal knowledge, a stable, unwavering realization of your true identity, which doesn't change with circumstances.
So it's a fundamental shift in being, not just a nice feeling that passes.
Right. The aim isn't really to collect more pleasant experiences for the me, the ego. It's more about seeing through or even dismantling that very experiencer who feels the need to constantly seek those things.
Because that seeker is rooted in a sense of lack.
Precisely. The bliss, the ananda, often talked about like in Satchitananda, it's said to transcend the whole pleasure-pain duality. It's a peace that comes from freedom from craving, not just the temporary satisfaction of craving.
I like how Ayer puts it with the 3 Ps of spiritual happiness: pleasure, peace, and purpose. It shows that evolution.
It does. From fleeting external pleasure to a more lasting inner peace, finally culminating in this deep sense of purpose that arises from knowing your true nature, moving from outer dependence to inner freedom.
And that brings us right to this core idea you mentioned,
Yeah.
the ego. The dissolution of the ego seems central to almost every path.
It really is. The ego is generally understood as that limited, constructed sense of I, the self that feels pride, fear, desire. It's seen as the source of our suffering and the main barrier to deeper awareness.
And our ordinary thinking mind is kind of the architect of that ego, always chattering, worrying, planning, judging.
That's the common view, yes. The mind constantly creates divisions, meo, good, bad, past, future, and generates a lot of our anxiety and stress. So a big part of the journey is about quieting that mental noise.
Sometimes described as killing the mind, which sounds pretty dramatic.
It does sound dramatic, but it's more about stilling its incessant, often unhelpful activity. It's about disidentification.
Disidentification, meaning realizing you're not those thoughts.
Exactly. Realizing I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the ego. You have thoughts, feelings, a body, but your fundamental identity is the awareness observing it all, the silent witness.
The soul, Atman, the spark of unique life, different names for that deeper consciousness.
Right, and shifting your identification from the transient ego to that timeless awareness is what brings liberation.
But here's that paradox again. Effortful surrender. You need discipline, practice, effort.
But the aim is to surrender the very self that's making the effort.
So practices like selfless service, karma yoga, or renunciation, they're ways the ego uses its own will to undermine itself.
That's a good way to put it. You're using volition to starve the ego of its usual attachments and demands, forcing it to loosen its grip. It's a striving aimed at self-dissolution, not self-improvement in the ordinary sense.
Okay, so while the destination might be similar, the maps, the paths, are incredibly diverse. Let's look at some of the major traditions, starting with the East. Buddhism, for instance.
Buddhism, of course, starts with Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. His core insights are captured in the Four Noble Truths.
Suffering exists, it is a cause, it can cease, and there's a path to make it cease. Pretty direct.
Very direct. And the goal is nirvana.
Which means to extinguish.
Yes, extinguishing the three fires or poisons, greed, aversion or hatred, and ignorance or delusion. This leads to liberation from samsara, the cycle of rebirth driven by these poisons.
And the practical how-to guide is the Noble Eightfold Path.
Exactly. And it's crucial to see it not just as a list of rules, but as an integrated system for training the mind and heart.
8 spokes of a wheel, right. All connected. Things like right view, understanding reality as it is.
Right. Mindfulness, being present without judgment, right concentration, developing deep meditation.
Right speech, right action, right livelihood, the ethical component.
Right effort, right resolve. They all work together. It's often grouped into 3 higher trainings: ethical conduct, sila, meditative concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. Ethics supports concentration. Concentration enables wisdom.
It's very systematic.
Yeah.
Now, how does Hinduism approach this? The goal there is moksha.
Moksha, yes. Liberation from samsara and karma. It's achieved through Atma Jnana, self-realization.
Which is realizing your true self, the Atman.
And its fundamental identity with Brahman, the ultimate absolute reality. The core realization is, I am Brahman.
And Hinduism is known for offering multiple paths, the yogas, recognizing different temperaments. The Bhagavad Gita talks about this.
It does. It outlines 4 primary yogas, or paths to union. First, karma yoga.
The path of action. Selfless service, right, like you mentioned earlier, acting without attachment to the results. Mother Teresa often comes up as an example here.
A powerful example, yes. Then there's Bhakti yoga, the path of devotion.
For the more heart-centered person.
Exactly. Cultivating intense personal love for the divine through prayer, chanting, curtain rituals, the ego melts away in love and surrender.
Third is Jnana yoga, the path of knowledge or wisdom.
This uses the intellect, discrimination, viveka, to inquire into the nature of reality. The core practice is often self-inquiry, asking, who am I? Relentlessly, alongside studying scriptures like the Upanishads to directly realize Atman is Brahman.
And finally, Raja Yoga, the royal path.
This is the path of systematic meditation and mental control, most famously outlined in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It has an 8-limbed Ashtanga structure leading towards samadhi, deep meditative absorption.
And Hatha Yoga, the physical postures many people know, fits in here.
Often seen as a preparation for Raja Yoga, yes. Preparing the body and energy system for deeper meditation. And importantly, these paths aren't necessarily separate. They often overlap and can be integrated.
Okay, let's turn to Taoism. A very different feel, focused on harmony, simplicity, nature.
Very different, yes. Rooted in texts like the Tao Te Ching, attributed to Laozi. It centers on the Tao, the indescribable way or source of everything, and Te, its inherent power or virtue manifest in the world.
And the goal isn't quite escape or union in the same way, is it? It's more about alignment.
Alignment is a good word. Aligning with the Tao, returning to your original spontaneous nature, Ziran. It emphasizes undoing, letting go of artificial conditioning rather than doing or striving in the conventional sense.
So key principles would be things like Wu Wei.
Wu Wei, often translated as non-action, but that's a bit misleading. It's more like effortless action or actionless action.
Acting in harmony with the natural flow of things. Like a skilled boatman using the current.
Precisely. Action without struggle or forcing. Then there's a focus on simplicity, humility, letting go of excessive desires and complexity, living in tune with nature's rhythms.
And Taoism also has practices related to energy, right? Qi.
Yes, cultivating qi, or vital life force energy, through practices like qigong and tai chi for health, balance, and spiritual development. And in some schools, there's Nidan, or inner alchemy, complex practices aimed at transforming internal energies for longevity and spiritual realization.
Looking at these three, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, you really see distinct approaches. Buddhism seems focused on deconstruction, taking apart the illusion of self and suffering.
Hinduism offers paths of devotion, substitution, replacing ego with God, selfish action with selfless action, and also direct inquiry.
And Taoism is about realignment, getting back to a natural, harmonious state.
And as you hinted before, the underlying view of reality, is there an eternal self? Is there no self? Really shapes the methods used. The why influences the how.
Now, this quest isn't just an Eastern phenomenon. We see powerful parallels in Western mystical traditions, too, often framed as union with a personal God.
Absolutely. In Abrahamic mysticism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the goal is often described in relational terms.
So in Christianity, mysticism involves seeking a deep, transformative connection with God's love and wisdom. People like St. Teresa of Avila or St. John of the Cross describing stages of prayer and contemplation.
Yes, leading towards unitive states. Eastern Orthodoxy even has the concept of theosis, becoming divine or participating in the divine nature through grace.
And in Islam, Sufism represents this inner dimension.
The Sufi path is about purifying the heart, qalb, to directly experience God's presence. A key idea is fana, annihilation of the false self, the ego.
To achieve baka, abiding or subsistence in God. Rumi's poetry often speaks beautifully about this surrender, this undoing the world's grasp.
It really does. And this highlights a subtle philosophical difference we touched on. Is the ultimate goal a perfected relationship with the divine? Or realizing one is the divine? Or perhaps that the whole notion of a separate one is the illusion?
Let's briefly touch on Jainism and Sikhism too. They also have distinct paths.
Jainism aims for kaivalya, a state of absolute independence or liberation for the soul, jiva, achieved by purifying it of all karmic particles.
Through the three jewels, right? Faith, knowledge, conduct, and a very strong emphasis on ahimsa, nonviolence.
Radical nonviolence, yes. Sikhism seeks mukti, liberation, and union with Waheguru, the divine principle, by overcoming the ego, Hamai.
And they emphasize three pillars for this.
Yes. Namjapo, meditating on the divine name, Kirat Karo, honest living, and Vanchako, sharing selfless service. Community and ethical action are very central.
Okay, so we have all these rich spiritual traditions talking about enlightenment. Now, it's really important to distinguish this from the Western Enlightenment. Totally different meaning.
Absolutely critical distinction. The Western Enlightenment, 18th century, was primarily an intellectual and cultural movement.
Championing reason, science, individualism. Cats dare to know, using your own intellect.
Right, so the focus was outward understanding and mastering the natural world through reason and science. Spiritual enlightenment focuses inward understanding and transcending the self.
And the role of the mind is almost opposite. Western Enlightenment elevates intellect as supreme.
While spiritual traditions see the intellect as a tool, but ultimately something to be quieted or transcended for direct experience.
And the relationship with religion differs too. The Western Enlightenment was often critical of, or even hostile to, organized religion.
Whereas spiritual enlightenment is, by definition, at the very heart of the mystical dimensions of these religions.
So just to be clear for everyone listening, spiritual enlightenment isn't about becoming more rational or knowledgeable in the conventional sense. It's a radical shift beyond the rational ego.
Precisely. And understanding that sets the stage for looking at how people actually experience this journey, the stages they might go through.
Right, the topography of transformation. It often starts, as we said, with that feeling of discontent, doesn't it?
That vague yearning, yes. Or sometimes a crisis. It's the mumukshu stage in Hinduism, the longing for liberation.
That leads to the quest, the jigasu stage, seeking knowledge, teachers, reading everything you can find, kind of a honeymoon period.
Often, yes, full of excitement and discovery, but then comes a potentially tougher phase.
The purge and shedding, letting go of old ways, beliefs, maybe even relationships that no longer fit.
It can be painful, like casting off anchors, as you put it. Necessary, but challenging.
A real turning point seems to be the emergence of the witness. That moment you realize you're not your thoughts, you're the awareness watching them.
That's pivotal. It creates space, detachment, and from there, people often report glimpses of unity and bliss.
Temporary tastes of that oneness, that deep peace.
Exactly. Powerful motivators to keep going. And then the ongoing work is integration.
Bringing these insights into everyday life, trying to live from that deeper place while still, paying the bills and dealing with traffic.
That's the lifelong practice, really. Walking between worlds. So it's this cycle. Deconstruction, questioning, purging, dissolving ego, and reconstruction, building a new way of being based on that deeper reality.
Now let's clarify some key terms that often get mixed up. Spiritual awakening, that's more the initial shift. Seeing the ego for what it is.
Generally, yes. The first conscious step beyond the purely egoic perspective. It might be temporary or the start of something deeper.
Then self-realization, mainly from Hinduism. That's the direct knowing of your true nature. I am Brahman. Is it considered permanent?
It's typically understood as an irreversible realization, yes, the direct, unmediated knowledge of Atman as Brahman.
And moksha is the result of that. The liberation itself, freedom from the cycle of rebirth.
Exactly. Moksha is the state of freedom that follows from self-realization. Realizing you have wings, self-realization allows you to fly free from the cage, moksha.
Okay. And then nirvana into Buddhism. Also liberation, but framed differently.
Framed as extinguishing the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, leading to the end of suffering and rebirth, all within the understanding of anatta, no self.
So moksha implies freeing an existing eternal self, while nirvana is extinguishing the illusion of a self altogether, your philosophy in miniature.
That captures the core difference in their philosophical underpinnings, yes. And Buddhism also maps out stages like stream entry, once-returner, non-returner, arahant, progressive levels of liberation marked by shedding specific mental hindrances or fetters.
Another point of discussion is gradual versus sudden enlightenment. Is it step by step or all at once?
That's a classic debate. Gradualism emphasizes the slow, steady cultivation through practices like the Eightfold Path or Raja Yoga, accumulating merit and wisdom over time.
While Subitism, or sudden awakening schools like Zen or some Advaita Vedanta paths, emphasize that enlightenment is an instantaneous recognition. Satori in Zen.
Because your true nature is already present, it's not something you build, you just suddenly realize it.
How do most traditions view this? Is it one or the other?
Often, it's seen as a mix. There might be sudden breakthrough moments or glimpses, but these usually need to be followed by gradual practice to stabilize, deepen, and integrate that insight into your whole being.
So maybe a sudden recognition, followed by the gradual work of living it.
That's a common understanding. Kuning, the Zen patriarch, suggested the path is one, but people's capacity to realize it might be quick or slow. Readiness plays a part.
Okay, let's talk about the tools, the actual practices people use on this journey. They seem to fall into cultivating mind, heart, and wisdom.
That's a helpful framework. For the mind, meditation is obviously key, so many forms.
Breath focus, mindfulness of thoughts, visualization, mantra, all aiming to quiet the chatter and deepen awareness, leading towards samadhi, concentration.
Yes. And related is mindfulness practice itself, paying non-judgmental attention to the present moment. Sensations, feelings, thoughts, weakening those automatic reactions.
And contemplation, how's that different?
Contemplation is more analytical, using the mind to reflect deeply on spiritual truths, scriptures, or koans, or questions like, who am I? It uses reason to point beyond reason.
Okay, then cultivating the heart.
Yeah.
Devotion, bhakti.
Using the power of love directed towards the divine or a chosen ideal through prayer, chanting, kirtan, worship. It's about surrendering the ego in love.
And compassion and loving kindness practices, metta, sending goodwill outwards.
Systematically cultivating goodwill, yes. Towards yourself first, then friends, neutral people, difficult people, eventually all beings. It directly counteracts anger, judgment, and separation.
And selfless service, karma yoga, which we touched on. Acting without expectation.
A very powerful heart purifier, eroding selfishness through action in the world.
And finally, cultivating wisdom directly. Self-inquiry vichara.
That rigorous, sustained investigation, who am I? Not looking for a conceptual answer, but tracing the sense of I back to its source in pure awareness.
And study of sacred texts, fatya, engaging with the wisdom traditions.
Reading, reflecting, allowing the insights from scriptures like the Gita, the Sutras, the Tao Te Ching to guide your understanding and practice.
And underpinning all this is living the path, ethical conduct, sila.
Absolutely essential. Things like non-harming, truthfulness, non-stealing, the yamas niyamas in yoga, the precepts in Buddhism. They aren't just moral rules, they reduce mental agitation and create the stability needed for deeper practice.
And right, livelihood, choosing work that doesn't cause harm, aligning your daily life with your values.
It integrates the path into the world. So you have this holistic system, head, wisdom, heart, compassion, devotion, hands, action, discipline. Most balanced paths involve all three.
And the practices themselves also act like mirrors, showing you where you're stuck, where your ego is still active.
Exactly. They reveal yourself to yourself, illuminating the next steps.
Now, this journey, while potentially leading to ultimate peace, isn't always blissful. There are significant challenges, perils on the path.
Definitely. These aren't necessarily setbacks, though. Sometimes they're signs of deep transformation happening.
Like the famous Dark Night of the Soul from St. John of the Cross.
Yes. It describes a period of intense spiritual desolation, emptiness, a feeling of God's absence. Importantly, it's not the same as clinical depression, though it can feel similar, and it often happens after initial breakthroughs or experiences of light.
That seems terrifying. Feeling abandoned after tasting something profound. What's happening there?
It's often understood as a necessary purification, the shedding of the deepest layers of the ego, the old self really resisting its dissolution. It's like the final burning away of attachments and illusions.
So paradoxically, it's a sign of progress, a blessing in disguise.
That's how many mystics and traditions frame it. A painful but necessary stage preparing the ground for a more stable, integrated realization. Not a sign you're doing it wrong.
Another major pitfall is something called spiritual bypassing.
Coined by psychologist John Welwood, it's using spiritual ideas, beliefs, or practices to avoid dealing with unresolved psychological issues, emotional wounds, or basic human needs.
So the ego puts on a spiritual mask.
Essentially, yes. It can manifest in different ways. There's the bypass of bliss and light, always needing to be positive, denying or repressing difficult emotions. Toxic positivity, basically.
Or the opposite, the bypass of bitterness and isolation.
Right. Using detachment as an excuse to withdraw, become cynical, or avoid intimacy and messy human relationships.
Or the bypass of blame, projecting your own shadow onto others.
Blaming others, the world, or unenlightened people for your own pain rather than taking responsibility. It's the ego protecting itself, creating a subtle spiritual fortress.
And the danger is that the unresolved stuff doesn't go away. It just festers, hindering real growth. As Carrie Mangy said, it makes the tunnel of authenticity longer.
Exactly. Real spiritual maturity involves embracing your full humanity, shadow, and light, not trying to prematurely transcend the difficult parts. Psychological honesty is crucial.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. How are modern science and psychology looking at all this? There seems to be more openness now.
There is. Psychology, for instance, has moved beyond dismissing these experiences and now actively studies the mental health benefits of practices like meditation, reduced anxiety, depression, increased well-being.
But beyond just benefits, what about the state of awakening itself? Are there common characteristics?
Yes, research on individuals reporting awakened states consistently finds things like increased positive emotions, serenity, joy, decreased negative ones, especially fear, a greater sense of connection, empathy, compassion, and a shift towards a more global or world-centric perspective.
And these aren't just temporary changes.
Studies suggest lasting shifts in personality, values, worldview, a reduced fear of death, and less identification with thoughts. It's often described as an unlearning of conditioning.
And what about that connection to distress? You mentioned earlier that intense suffering can sometimes trigger awakening.
That's a fascinating finding from recent research. A significant number of spontaneous awakenings seem to be precipitated by periods of intense psychological turmoil, grief, depression, loss. It's like a modern validation of the dark night potentially being a gateway.
Wow. So difficulties aren't just obstacles, they could be catalysts.
Yeah.
Now, what about the brain? Neurotheology.
Right. This field that tries to map the neural correlates the brain activity associated with spiritual experiences, not to reduce the experience to just brain activity, but to understand the biological dimension.
And they found some intriguing things through brain scans of meditators and people having these experiences.
They have, for example, parietal lobe deactivation. This area is involved in our sense of self, orientation in space and time, when its activity decreases.
People report feeling oneness, losing the sense of a separate self.
Exactly. The subjective experience maps onto a change in that specific brain region's activity. It suggests our usual sense of self is actively constructed by the brain. Increased limbic system activation areas like the amygdala and hippocampus involved in emotion and memory. This correlates with the intense feelings of love, awe, or bliss often reported and helps solidify the memory of the experience as deeply significant.
Makes sense. And the frontal lobes, involved in attention.
Show increased activity during focused meditation, as expected. And some research points to potential long-term changes in the thalamus, a key relay station for sensory information, which could relate to the permanent shift in perception some people report.
So we see biological footprints. Oneness correlates with parietal quieting, bliss with limbic activation. It gives scientific plausibility without explaining away the mystery of consciousness itself.
Precisely. It bridges the gap, showing these aren't just imaginary experiences, but have tangible correlates in our biology, while leaving the ultimate nature of consciousness an open question.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this. We've covered a lot of ground. The core themes seem universal: recognizing suffering, the need for purification, self-discovery, realizing a reality beyond the limited ego.
And the paths consistently involve those three elements: discipline for the mind, opening the heart through compassion and devotion, and cultivating wisdom through inquiry and understanding.
But there's no single recipe. The beauty for the modern seeker is being able to draw inspiration from different streams, right?
Absolutely. Maybe the precision of Buddhist mindfulness, the devotion of Bhakti, the intellectual rigor of Jnana, the harmony of Taoism. You can weave a path that resonates personally.
And finding that balance between knowing, understanding the concepts, having the right view, and not know the surrender, the effortless wu-wei aspect. Intellect takes you so far.
But the final step often involves letting go, a kind of faith or trust in the process itself.
So for you listening, maybe wanting to explore this further, what are some concrete starting points?
Well, first, maybe establish a foundational practice. Even 10-20 minutes of daily meditation or mindfulness can start to build inner stability and awareness. Consistency is key.
Second, view ethical living not just as rules, but as practice. Non-harming, truthfulness, generosity. Actively practicing these reduces inner conflict and cultivates peace. It's active sila.
Third, try to dissolve that line between spiritual practice and daily life. Use work as karma yoga, conversations as right speech practice, simple moments like walking as opportunities for presence and harmony. Make life the laboratory.
And finally, be prepared for challenges. Expect dry spells or dark night type experiences potentially as signs of progress. Practice self-honesty to avoid spiritual bypassing.
And don't be afraid to seek support from a community, a therapist who understands these things, a wise guide. You don't have to navigate it all alone.
It's clearly a demanding path requiring courage and persistence. But the promise, echoed across ages and now even hinted at by science, is profound. A way of being that's truly free, deeply peaceful, connected, and wise.
It's about realizing a potential inherent within all of us.
So, as we wrap up, here's a thought to take with you. If intense difficulty can sometimes be the very trigger for profound awakening, what if the biggest challenges in your own life aren't just things to get through, but are actually hidden invitations to discover something much deeper about yourself? Maybe look at your experiences through that lens this week.